It was a hot summer night, one of those where the stars seemed to shine with a special intensity. Five friends, Tom, Sarah, Emily, Mike, and Alex, were preparing for an exciting adventure in the middle of the forest. They had heard of a place known as Whispering Pines, an abandoned campsite situated in the heart of a dense forest, which became the meeting place for the night that promised to be full of stories of horror and fun. The rumor that the camp was haunted added an extra layer of excitement to the endeavor. With backpacks on their backs, flashlights in hand, and enough supplies for the night, they walked along the narrow trail until they reached the location, while laughter and jokes echoed through the forest. Whispering Pines was known by its ominous name due to the constant sound of the trees swaying in the wind. The night breeze made the branches brush together, creating whispers that seemed to echo throughout the forest. The friends set up their tents in a circle near a fire that they began to light. The flame crackled, filling the air with its cozy warmth and casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. Sitting around the campfire, they began sharing horror stories. Sarah started with a story about a local legend, while Emily added spooky details with her vivid imagination. The forest, now shrouded in darkness, seemed about to come alive with its own spooky stories. The sound of the crackling campfire mixed with the murmur of the trees, and the shadows danced across the friends' faces, giving the night a sense of anticipation and fear. Tom, always the joker in the group, suggested they play a truth or dare game to increase the excitement. As the horror stories unfolded and laughter filled the air, no one could ignore the feeling that something was wrong in that dark forest. Friends attributed these feelings to the macabre environment and the atmosphere of excitement. However, as the night progressed, strange events began to occur. Broken branches sounded in the distance, branches moved mysteriously, and something seemed to watch them from the darkness. At first they ignored these incidents, attributing them to wild animals or exalted imagination. After all, that's what they expected on a night of horror stories in a place known for being haunted. As everyone laughed and joked, no one could have predicted the dark turn this night had in store for them. Fear and paranoia began to infiltrate the friends' minds, and a sense of unrest came over them. They were about to experience a night that would change their lives forever, but they still had no idea what awaited them deep in the dark forest of Whispering Pines. As the night progressed, the group of friends continued to share horror stories and laughed nervously to stave off the growing discomfort. The shadows of the trees seemed darker, and the whispering night breeze created a chilling atmosphere around the campfire. While the friends talked and played, strange events began to occur. Broken branches echoed in the forest, as if someone or something was moving in the shadows. Branches swayed mysteriously, as if pushed by an invisible presence. A shiver ran down everyone's spine, but they tried to maintain a good mood. However, as the night deepened, the atmosphere became tense. One of the friends, Mark, who was sitting a little away from the group, began to look visibly upset. He looked at the dark trees with a frightened expression. "Do you guys feel that?" Mark said with a trembling voice. "Something's not right here." The other friends laughed, believing that Mark was just trying to scare them after all. He was known for his pranks. However, Mark continued to insist that something was watching him from the shadows. "I'm serious, guys," he exclaimed. "I saw a dark figure in the trees." "Has anyone else seen it?" Everyone looked in the direction Mark was pointing, but they could see nothing beyond the trees shrouded in darkness. They thought Mark was trying to create an even scarier atmosphere for Horror Story Night. However, Mark's discomfort did not ease, and he continued to claim that something was watching him. The group tried to convince him that there was nothing there, but Mark refused to change his opinion. As the laughter continued, an air of anxiety spread throughout the group. The night wore on, and the sound of the trees whispering grew louder and more sinister. Every inexplicable sound and every shadow moving in the darkness became a source of tension. Friends began to wonder if the horror stories about the camp could be more than just urban legends. Around midnight, when everyone was preparing to settle into their tents, a scream of terror tore through the silence of the night. It was Lisa, one of the friends, who had gone out briefly to use the nearby makeshift bathroom. His panicked scream echoed in the forest and froze everyone's blood. Running in the direction of the scream, the group found Lisa in shock, shaking and unable to articulate what had happened. She had temporarily disappeared into the shadows of the forest, and something had terrified her. Desperately, they tried to calm Lisa and understand what had happened, but she was pale and unable to form coherent sentences. She murmured about shadows moving around her and something following her in the darkness. It was clear that the fun had turned into a terrifying nightmare, and the group were about to embark on a desperate search for answers, and, most importantly, for Lisa, who was traumatized by what she had faced that night. Whatever was happening at Whispering Pines, it was a far cry from a simple night of horror stories. The darkness of the forest hid sinister secrets, and the friends were determined to find out what was watching them in the shadows and what had happened to Lisa. The night turned into a nightmare that would bring them closer to the inexplicable and absolute terror. Lisa's terrified scream had silenced the joy and fun of the night. The group of friends surrounded her, trying to calm her down as they watched her shake uncontrollably. She was pale, eyes wide, unable to articulate what had happened. "Lisa, what happened?" asked Tom in a worried voice. "Are you well?" After taking a few deep breaths, Lisa was finally able to speak, although her voice was still shaking. I was outside, going to the bathroom, and then I saw something in the shadows. I couldn't see it clearly, but it was a dark figure, and it seemed to move. I tried to run back to camp, but it felt like it was following me. I don't know what it was, but I was so scared. The friends exchanged worried looks. The eerie atmosphere of the forest, the unsettling shadows, and now Lisa's report created a feeling of genuine terror. They decided not to let her out of their sight, and while Alex took her under his wing, the others decided to scour the surrounding area for clues or signs of whatever Lisa had seen. As they investigated the surroundings, they found unexplained tracks in the damp earth. Deep marks, as if something had dragged its feet, led towards the dark forest. The friends followed the tracks, each step increasing their sense of apprehension. The forest, which had previously seemed picturesque and mysterious, was now oppressive and threatening. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the night sounds that had once been just part of the scenery now seemed like ominous whispers. As they advanced, Emily, the bravest of the group, made a disturbing discovery. She found a scarf belonging to Lisa, thrown on the floor. It was dirty and torn, as if it had been torn off violently. "That's from Lisa," exclaimed Emily, with a worried expression. She was here, and something got her. The group began to panic. Whatever was in the forest seemed to have caught Lisa. The paranoia and fear that had previously been barely palpable was now overwhelming. They returned to camp, where they found Alex and Lisa, who was still shaking and unable to provide any further details. The decision to abandon camp and return to the safety of civilization was unanimous. The once attractive forest had turned into a nightmare. But when they tried to return along the same route they had taken to the camp, they realized that they were completely lost. The trees closed in intimidatingly around them, and the sounds of the night seemed more menacing than ever. Panic grew as they moved further and further away from the camp. The flashlights wavered in the friends' trembling hands, while the forest seemed to move around them, shrouded in unsettling shadows. It was as if the forest itself was alive and determined to hold them in its sinister embrace. Hours passed, but the group could not find their way back. They were lost in the darkness, and despair began to set in. The horror stories they had shared earlier in the evening were now turning into real nightmares. What had happened to Lisa? Who or what was hiding in the shadows of the forest? The answer was still beyond his understanding, but one thing was certain: Whispering Pines revealed a terrifying side that no one could have predicted. Now, the group of friends were desperate to find a way out, and, hopefully, rescue Lisa from the darkness that enveloped her. The night in the Whispering Pines forest seemed endless. The group of friends was lost, away from their camp, and Lisa had disappeared into the shadows. The fear and disorientation were palpable as they advanced into the darkness of the forest. Emily's flashlight lit the way as they continued to search for any sign that would lead them back to camp. Every sound, every shadow, and every sigh of the forest seemed to conspire against them. The feeling that something was watching them never left them. "That's not right," Mike said in a shaky voice. "We're being watched, I know that." Tom looked at the dense darkness around him. "Let's stay calm, guys. We should find Lisa and get out of here. She must be scared." Emily determinedly stated, "That's right. Let's find our friend and stick together. Maybe we should try following those tracks we found earlier. They followed the tracks they had discovered earlier, leading them deeper into the dark forest. With each step, the feeling that something was chasing them seemed to intensify. The atmosphere was permeated with tension, and the forest whispered with an almost inaudible but disturbing sound. The friends began to hear murmurs in the darkness, indistinct whispers that seemed to echo through the trees. The murmurs were unintelligible, but they echoed in his ears like a dark secret. The feeling of being watched became unbearable, and the fear grew with every step. Finally, after a tireless search, they arrived at a clearing in the forest. In the center, they found something that made them tremble with terror. It was Lisa's torn scarf, deliberately placed on a rock. It was as if someone or something had left it there as an ominous warning. Alex, who was holding Lisa to comfort her, looked around and mouthed, "This is a message. From something we can't see. We need to get out of here now." The group met, and the decision to return at any cost was unanimous. But the forest, seemingly alive with an evil presence, wouldn't make things easier. The darkness around them seemed to swallow the light of their flashlights, and the murmurs turned to sinister laughter. The feeling of persecution increased. The friends felt trapped, as if they were being pushed into some kind of confrontation with the unknown. Fear was about to swallow them when suddenly a faint voice echoed through the forest. It was the sound of Lisa's voice. "I'm here," she said, her voice shaking. I'm scared, but I'm close." The friends followed Lisa's voice, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they called out to her. Eventually, they found her hiding behind a tree, still shaking in fear. "Lisa!" exclaimed Emily, relieved. "Are you well?" Lisa nodded, her eyes filled with dread. I don't know what happened. I was chased by something. Shadows. They surrounded me. I was so scared." The group of friends hugged Lisa and decided it was time to leave the Whispering Pines forest. They had no idea what they had faced that night, but they were determined not to find out. They followed the sinister murmurs and laughter until they finally left the forest and returned to camp. When they got there, they discovered that the sun was rising and the day was breaking. The darkness that had dominated the night was fading, and the silent forest seemed much less frightening in the daylight. Lisa was still shaken, but the group was relieved to have found her. They quickly packed up their things and left, leaving Whispering Pines and its unexplained horror stories behind. As they returned to civilization, no one mentioned what had happened that night. The fear and mystery they encountered in the forest were difficult to explain, and everyone had their own theories about the shadows and whispers they had faced. Whatever happened at Whispering Pines remained a mystery, a horror story they chose to forget. The only thing they knew for sure was that night they had witnessed something that was beyond human comprehension. The forest had revealed a sinister secret, a riddle that would never be solved, and they were determined to put it behind them. The only thing that mattered now was being safe and together again.